Top Afghan power brokers and Taliban have ended 2 days of landmark talks in Moscow. The outcome was a broad but vague statement. The Taliban once again emphasized on their demand for immediate withdrawal of all American troops from Afghanistan. The Taliban claimed that the United States promised to withdraw half of its troops from Afghanistan by the end of April. Taliban said this was decided during the talks in Moscow. However, the United States says a timeline for the troop withdrawal has not been fixed so far. The head of the Taliban delegation, Sher Mohammad Abbas Tanikzai, also said that negotiations on the timing of the withdrawal are still underway. Take a listen in.
American armies, we are in negotiation with the American side, and we are trying that the American forces should go out as soon as it is possible.
When?
What's the timeline?
The time is not fixed so far, and it's not agreed upon, but we are negotiating this.
The deputy leader of the Taliban delegation, Abdul Salam Hanafi, added that the United States and the Taliban will create their own technical committees that will work on a timeline for the withdrawal of the remaining troops. The United States, on the other hand, denied an immediate troop withdrawal. The U.S. Special Envoy Zarmi Khalilzad said that in recent days, the United States has heard some individual Taliban officials claim that there is a troop withdrawal timetable for Afghanistan. But Zarmi Khalilzad saying that they felt the need to correct that claim, saying that no troop withdrawal timetable exists. The Taliban have refused to meet the Afghan government. They denounced the Afghan government as a puppet regime. The joint declaration that was released after the Moscow talks states that all parties agreed on basic principles which include respect for Islamic principles in all areas. The parties in Moscow also agreed that the next peace process meeting would be held in Qatar.
The principal issues and wishes were peace, stability, and Afghanistan free of foreign forces, and Afghanistan free of intervention from any side. A sovereign Afghanistan, a progressive Afghanistan, an Afghanistan in which women and men together would educate and work for its future. All sides, from the Islamic movement of the Taliban to all other Afghans from all walks of life and political parties. The end result was the statement that was issued today in consensus almost. There was no opposition. We are happy with the outcome of the meeting.
Joining us on the broadcast this evening is Michael Kugelman. He's the Asia Program Deputy Director and Senior Associate for South Asia at the Woodrow Wilson Center. He's joining us from Washington. Hi, Michael. Those words by Hamid Karzai are ambitious. And the very fact that the meeting took place is, of course, a step forward in the direction towards peace. But the irony of it all being it's an intra-Afghan process, as it's been called, without the Afghan government's presence. The Afghan government clearly sidelined in that process. The Taliban refusing to speak to them. Can the peace talks move forward in the interest of the Afghans without getting the Afghan government on the negotiating table? And isn't that the immediate challenge for the Afghan government?
Well, you're absolutely right. I think that the biggest challenge in trying to make this a credible peace process is to find a way to get the Afghan government involved. But I think that will be very difficult to do. The Taliban has been very consistent in saying that it will not negotiate with this current government, which it regards as a stooge of the United States. And unfortunately, you can make an argument that the National Unity Government in Afghanistan, the current government there now, is not the product of an election. It's the product of a U.S.-led negotiation that came about after an election crisis in Afghanistan in 2014. So unfortunately, the Taliban can really make a strong argument to its constituents that the current government in Kabul is illegitimate. The question is, who can convince the Taliban to change its mind? And I do think that this recent meeting, these two-day meetings in Moscow with the Taliban and Afghan officials who are opposed to Ghani will make that all the more complicated. I think there's a risk of some type of parallel peace process being started where you have the Taliban talking very substantively with these Afghan politicians who do not represent the Afghan government.
Right. Two things here, Michael. First, the list of demands and preconditions that the Taliban has been coming to the table with ever since the talks process began. And the larger concern here is that even though there is no set timeline as of now, a rushed U.S. troop withdrawal could put the Taliban in a position to eventually take over. It's, of course, a complicated path to peace, but those questions and those sticking points and concerns still remain.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Taliban has been very inconsistent in stating its demands and its expectations. You know, on the one hand, it said at one point that the constitution would need to be changed. It's also said that it would want to have an Islamic system, which is very worrisome, given that the system that it presided over when it ran Afghanistan in the late 1990s was extremely repressive, particularly toward women. But on the other hand, you've had Taliban messaging in recent days saying that the Taliban would respect the rights of women. I think given its track record, we have to be very dubious of any promises that it may be making to respect the rights of women. But, you know, all this aside, the big issue, as he suggests now, is the issue of the Taliban agreeing to negotiate, or the Taliban agreeing to a ceasefire, and the Taliban agreeing to negotiate with the government in Afghanistan before there were to be a U.S. troop withdrawal. And I think that's a big sticking point in the negotiations between the Taliban and the U.S. government.